Hi guys, welcome back to Allegheny Homestead. So one of our favorite things to do in the evening is to have a nice cold homebrew beer. And just like everything else that we try to do on the homestead, we try to learn how to be as self-reliant as possible. Now, we aren't growing and malting our own grains yet, but maybe one day we'll get there. So today I'm going to be brewing up a cream ale. It's going to be a long day, so we better get busy. All our water we use for brewing is reverse osmosis. So to start out, for the mash, I'm going to warm up 3 gallons of water. So now I just need to get the rest of my equipment and supplies ready, get the brew kettle out, and then we can start grinding up some grains. So the first thing I need is 7 pounds of 2-row. 3/4 of a pound of Gambrinus honey. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right. And 1/4 of a pound of Belgian biscuit. And that's it. I really like simple recipes. So one of the things I like to do to stay really organized is I create a brew sheet for each beer that I brew. And basically it's just a place for me to take notes about any changes that I might make, and also have the date that I brewed it, the date that I expect it to be ready to keg, and then if I decide to do a specific gravity, the final ABV, and all that good stuff. Also, I keep a calendar that shows every day that I brew and what I brewed. It's just a really handy, quick reference for me to keep track of everything that is going on. And I'm old school, so I like old-fashioned paper and pencil for the most part. So now we're just waiting for our strike water to come up to temp. And I like to get it to about 170, 165. That way by the time I put it into the mashing bowl, it's at the perfect strike temperature I want of 162. All right, so it looks like we're up to temperature. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this in there and try not to burn myself in the process. That'll do. And here in just a little bit, we'll start refilling this container with about 5 gallons of sparge water. For now, let's get mashed in. All right, so we're up to temp. So we're gonna go ahead and get mashed in. Last little bit mashed in. Then we're going to drop the temp down of this to 150 and start our pump and set a timer for an hour. So I'm going to set the pump now, and I kind of have to keep a little bit of an eye on this, but other than that, it's just waiting for an hour for this to mash, and yeah. So now while this is mashing for an hour, we'll get our sparge water ready, which like I said is going to be about 5 gallons. I'm not too picky about the temperature of my sparge water. I haven't found that it makes a huge difference. However, getting it up to 170 helps a whole lot when you're trying to bring this up to a boil. So you don't have to wait quite as long if you get that sparge water nice and hot. I know a lot of people will argue with me on the temperature of the sparge water being just perfect, but in my experience, it hasn't made a huge difference, whether it's 150 or 170. But then again, I'm not trying to brew award-winning beers either, so your mileage may vary. So our 1 hour mash time is now done. We turn off the pump and we're gonna pull this basket out and start sparging. So now that we've pulled the basket, I'm going to go ahead and set this to boil temp, and it'll take about 45 minutes for it to get there, but by the time we're done sparging, it'll be about ready to go. All right, let's start sparging. I usually like to sparge about a gallon at a time, and then let that drip through the grain bed before I add the next gallon. But it's by no means precise. So I'm going to sparge this to about 6.5 gallons or so, and that way I have plenty of room to leave behind all the mess at the bottom of the mashing bowl, and then enough room to leave behind the yeast cake in the fermenter. And that'll give me about a little over 5 gallons going into the keg as the final product. So one thing about the mashing bowl is that the gallon measurements on the side of the tank are kind of hard to read when you're sparging. So you kind of have to get a flashlight and look down the side and find your measurements. I have a crazy light bulb in here. It's not a disco. So I'm looking to hit about 6.5 gallons by the time I'm done sparging. So our sparge is complete and we are almost up to temp. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this down and probably save this spent grain for the chickens. So now while we're waiting for that to get up to a boil, I'm gonna go ahead and get the hops ready. And for this cream ale, we're going to use 1 ounce of cluster hops, and that only has that one addition, and that's a 60-minute addition, and then good to go. So now that we're up to a boil, we're gonna go ahead and add our hops. I always like to use a hop basket to keep all that extra material out of the fermenter. So with 15 minutes left, I went ahead and added the chiller. That way it'll be sterile. And it's always a little tricky to get it in there when you have the hop basket in there, but managed. So at the end of our 15 minutes, we will turn this off, connect the chiller, and wait for it to come down to temp. That way we can pitch it on the yeast cake. All right, so now that our beer has done its 60-minute boil, I'm gonna turn it off. And then I'm gonna hook up the chiller. So now while I'm waiting for this beer to cool off, I'm gonna go ahead and start the fun part in cleaning some of this stuff up. Then once that beer cools off, I will be dropping it on top of this other cream ale yeast cake. All right, so now I'm gonna close this guy up. And add an airlock. And I like to go ahead and put a blow-off tube on mine because I usually fill my buckets pretty high. And this way, I don't have to worry about it. And I'll just stick this in a little container of water and it should be bubbling in no time. Well guys, I really hope you enjoyed seeing how I brew.
And if you haven't tried brewing yet, I highly suggest it. It's a lot of fun. Bye.